Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Charlotte Stebbing-Mills, and today I'm joined by Kai Simmonds, who is a soul purpose and mindset coach, speaker, and educator who is helping ambitious professionals and creative individuals to overcome their limiting beliefs and their shadows to live a life aligned to their soul purpose. Welcome to the show, Kai. So good to see you.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited for today's episode.
Oh, so am I. One of the reasons why I am so excited to have this conversation and to bring you on the show is because you know, for most of your life, you confessed that you've actually lived at kind of a burnt out, high achieving, perfectionist kind of lifestyle. And you've struggled with obviously your health and mental issues and thinking that this is essentially how life is supposed to be. But you're actually now living proof that that isn't how life has to be. So I'm very excited for our listeners to kind of hear your journey, your story, and what you're up to in the world, because I think you've got so much value to add.
Yeah, and whenever I'm doing a workshop or anything, I always say I'm a recovering perfectionist. I'm a recovering people pleaser. So, generally I'm good, but I still have my moments. So I always like to put that in there.
Exactly. You're human just like the rest of us and like our listeners listening. And I think that is important to mention, because I think often we strive for perfection and actually we just need to be directionally correct. We need to be aware. We need to know that, is perfect really this attainable thing or not? And this is why I'm so excited. So for our listeners, Kai, that haven't met you or maybe even heard you before and heard your story, what do we need to know about you that's led you here today to have this conversation?
Yeah, anything, I don't want to say anything, but most of the things that people I think have gone through, I've checked that box. And also when it came to both all of the health issues, the mental health issues,
Yeah.
I just want to know I've checked most of them, not on purpose. And then from the other side, trying to recover from all of those things, that one, I checked every single box. Like I was on a mission to figure out what was wrong with me. I left no stone unturned. So, yeah, I like to, I'm a trial and error kind of person. So both from that side, I can definitely relate to what they've gone through or what they're going through. And then also on knowing that the frustration that I had, I remember having like just being so frustrated, being constantly told, oh, but you're stressed, you're anxious. Okay. And what do I do about it? Like, how do I deal with it?
Yeah.
And also, I remember that part of my journey just feeling so frustrated, so let down, and just like really, really alone.
Mm.
So that was one of the things that kind of like, I never ever wanted to be a coach or a yoga teacher or a sound healer, but those were the things I did to help myself first and foremost.
Mm.
And then finding out that so many people experience what I experienced. And that's then what made me want to be, I need to start talking about it, and I need to start helping people so that people don't feel like, oh, this is an unfixable problem. Cause that's what I felt like for a long time.
Mm.
So yeah, if you're listening and you're like, I have these things, I'm doing the healthy things, but nothing's moving, I understand. And you're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a tricky one, especially when you think that you're doing the things, right? You're doing the stuff, you're showing up, you're listening to podcasts, you're reading the books, and there's
Yeah.
so many like elements of it, but there is usually some like subtle things that are maybe not so obvious happening within us that we have to start to pay attention to. Before we kind of dive into that part of the conversation, what did your journey look like, in the sense you said like you ticked your boxes off, and you've almost like been through a lot of the common things. What are like what did that look like for you? For example, you just said there is like you were essentially told like you're stressed, you're anxious. And like who was telling you that about yourself?
Yeah, so was the doctors. And I also, another thing I want to add is this wasn't an overnight thing, right? This wasn't like in weeks. And I was super stubborn and I thought I knew everything. So so the first thing, obviously, like, I, and now I know that, but I had an eating disorder. I didn't know that I had an eating disorder. So I had an eating disorder. So that was the first thing. And then again, that led to physical and health issues. And so yeah, that was a huge thing that now I understand, like, oh no, it's not normal to hate your body. Oh no, it's not normal to starve yourself. Like, oh no, it's not normal for your periods to be all over the place and to have horrible cramps. Like I thought these were just normal things. So those kind of like issues. And then having like that turned into like gut issues where like digestive problems, acne, low energy, weight gain up and down. And then I just was like, oh, these are normal things, just kind of brushing it under the rug. But the thing that hit me the most was when I had my first panic attack and anxiety attack. I used to be a teacher and I had my first one when I was teaching. Like And you know, I'm a teacher, I'm in a class with 25 students, and like, just like, look, and this is also, it's different. I just remember not being able to breathe and thinking I was going to die. And then I don't remember what happened, but apparently a colleague came in, and the next thing you know, I woke up in the nurse's office. So but then here's the other thing. When that happened, I went to the doctor. He's like, oh, it's just stress and anxiety. Like, okay, I'll take a break. And I take a break. And I was like, I thought that was it. I thought it was like a one-time thing. I'm going to have a panic attack, anxiety attack. It's never going to happen again. A few months later, it happened again while I was driving. And that's also not a great place to have an anxiety or a panic attack. And then I was like, oh, nothing. Same thing. Go to the doctor. Yes, you're stressed. You're anxious. You need to exercise more. You need to eat healthy. And I was just like, I've grown up playing competitive sports my whole life. So I like played basketball in college. I played soccer growing up. So I'm a very active person, like naturally. So it was just like, what? I do that. And so, yeah, it was a lot. And again, but still, it took a year for me I went to doctors, just gave me your stress, and I didn't really do anything. I didn't really change into my life. And then it got to the point again where the panic attacks started happening more frequently. So before it was like one time, and then it was like months later, and then it was like weeks later. And I was like, this is like not gonna go away. And I think that's another thing that people think of, like with burnout, like, oh, it's just a one-time thing, it'll go away. Maybe if it happens once, but if you don't start changing, or if you don't start looking into it, then it's probably going to start happening again, but more frequently, if you don't start taking action. And again, maybe a lot of people, like I did, will go to the doctor and they'll say, you're stressed. You take 10 days off, you take a vacation. Great. You need that. I'm not saying don't take a vacation, take it. But there's something deeper. And that's the thing that it took me so much longer to understand and have to figure out, because I wasn't getting those answers when I went to the doctor. So that was the small version, the short version of it.
Thank you for sharing it, because I think that it is such a common journey that people go on, that there are these symptoms at the time, and it's very, very common as well, right, is that we don't recognize that those were the signs and signals until later. So looking back now, you mentioned like the eating disorder. At the time it was normal, right, because we do normalize certain things in society. We normalize that it's okay to be stressed and you need to take a break. Like the doctors essentially that you described there were normalizing that stress is present, but almost minimizing it at the same time and not exploring it perhaps at a deeper level. And that's, you know, no detriment to doctors. And we've had this conversation on the podcast before. Doctors have their place, but we have to start to pay attention and take responsibility for our own experiences. And if we're told by somebody, you know, of authority, that they think that it's okay, you just need a break, we are very susceptible as a society to just take that and be, oh, okay, well then that must be the case. There must be something wrong with me because I'm doing these things and something's not right. And that comes in, you said frustration a couple of times earlier, and that frustration, I think, coupled then perhaps with certain shame that comes with, if there's something wrong with me, that is just an absolute recipe for disaster, right? And like you quite rightly said there, and I really want to emphasize it, is that these things build up. You know, our body is like an alarm giving us these signals, and this is why those symptoms become so frequent. We call it like stress stacking here at Wellness Theories. Like we're constantly stacking up this stress, and if we don't, we have these explosions, whether that comes out as like a panic attack or overthinking or over verbalizing something that you wish you hadn't, over expression, under expression. There's so many different ways in which we have these like stress explosions, and that is just like a classic example of a journey where you have like these explosions, but then you get told, well, actually, like everything's okay, you just need to chill. It's like, what? What do you mean? Like, and that's a big stumbling block, right? And people don't know where to start.
Yeah, exactly.
So talking of societal pressures, there's a lot of like societal expectations around what we're normalizing and what we're minimizing, but there's a lot of societal pressures around perfection, and we kind of touched on that earlier very, very lightly. Tell us your experience of that, because there's this like this unwritten rule that we're all supposed to be this way or that way.
It doesn't exist. And firstly, let me just say, put it out there, it doesn't exist. No one is perfect. Even me, with all of the things that I've done and I've learned, like I still get support from coaches and from my from the people I work with. So like it doesn't exist. So like let's take that on the table. But I think for me, where it really came from, which I now again understand because I went through therapy and I went through mindset coaching, and I do reflect and journal, is like I was telling you earlier, is like I grew up playing competitive sports, and my dad was like always driving us to succeed. And in sports it was like you're first or you're last, or like you can make all the points in the you can score all the points, you miss one free throw, not good enough. So for me, the core belief that I always had about myself was that I was never good enough, because again, in sports, I had just had that competitive nature of like always being the best, always being number one, and pushing myself to succeed. And again, that carried then through my grades, and like all of my validation came from external achievements, which is why I was always pushing myself in every single thing of life, in work, and even in relationships. I need to be the best, perfect girlfriend. I needed to be the perfect friend. I need to be the perfect daughter. I need to be the perfect everything. So because I constantly was like looking to external achievements for my validation, for my sense of worth, because that's what I thought. And then if I didn't get that from other people, it was like, oh, I'm not good enough. Yep. Oh, I can't do these things. Oh, I'm not worthy. Oh, yep. I don't deserve love. So again, it came down to a lot of like, again, this is not something I think, I go out and like, what is it? It does take time for you to sit either reflecting through journaling, or also specifically therapy. I always say, starting with therapy is a great way to create that awareness, right? So it came from that. Like, I did not know these things, so I had to get help. Yep. And again, when we're just, and another thing is like, we're sometimes, if we're not talking about these things like we are talking about now, what tends to happen is we just kind of live our lives on autopilot. How we were raised, how we were told to behave. We just grow up with this kind of conditioning, these programming, and we continue to follow this pattern of like, I'm not good enough, continue to be perfect to be perfect. Yep. And it's only when you stop and you look and you're like, I think I need to get off of autopilot. I think there's something else. That's when the shifts will start to happen. You start to seek therapy, you start to work into coaching. But yeah, it's a lot of the way that we're raised, either from our parents, either from school, either from society. And then we just stay on autopilot, right? If we don't change, right? Or reflect on these things.
Yeah, until we typically get a wake-up call where that alarm is kind of going off, right? And it makes us pay attention. Like for you, it was panic attacks in pretty severe situations. Do you panic attack whilst you're driving your car? If that's not going to wake you up, what is? Like there's so many things. Like for me, it was getting to the point where I was so emotionally overwhelmed and depleted that I wanted to check out completely. And like it was at that moment, I'm like, something isn't right. But it took all of that. And again, looking back, there were signs. There were so many signs, and I'm like, how did I not see the signs, right? But it's one of those things, like sometimes we have to get to that point. But my question, I guess, to you then is, do we have to get to that point where our body and our mind is like just like thrusting these situations and experiences in front of us to so almost force us to get out of autopilot? Can we choose to do it sooner?
Absolutely. Like, and it's a choice completely. Like, I know we're stubborn, and I'm stubborn. I had to get there to that point to take a change, but you don't have to. And I hope if anyone's listening and you're like, if this is that peak and you're right here, this is the time you start taking action, right? Don't wait till you've hit that peak or that burnout or that overload. Yep. You don't have to hit it. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, absolutely do not.
That's exactly why I asked this question, because it's something that, if I even knew that there were podcasts like this is one of the reasons we have the podcast, is because there was no one talking about this stuff. Like I could not articulate my experience of what I was going through. I didn't know anybody else that was going through it. They probably were. Now, when you look at the statistics as well, it's like pretty much everyone is going through something in relation to stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. And it's nuts because we don't talk about it enough. So I definitely think having these conversations hopefully helps us to be more preventative rather than reactive. Absolutely. I want to really pull on something you were talking about there, is this belief of not being enough. When you look at your own journey, what role did that belief have, not only on your experiences that almost like woke you up to what was going on, but what has shifting that done for you in terms of how you can show up in the world today?
Oh my gosh, I'm a different person. I can't even we have to do a whole podcast of that. But so it's funny because there was one part of me when I was like trying to overcome that belief, is like, I call it my inner critic. My inner critic was like, no, you need me to tell you you're not good enough. Because if you don't have me, you're not going to push yourself. You're not going to want to achieve. You're going to be like this loser who does nothing with their life. If I'm not here telling you you're not good enough to push you. So I had that moment, right, where that inner critic was there. But the funny thing is, if you look at my life now, I do way more things,
Mm.
way more things than I ever did when 5 years ago. All I could do is like just one thing, and I would be exhausted from the day. Now, and again, I'm not saying you have to do a lot of things. I'm not this Miss Productivity queen. Like I'm not also promoting that. But if I just look at the things that I'm able to achieve, because I don't use that inner critic as my motivator to make me do things. I do things because they're aligned to who I am and my soul purpose, which is what I think we'll get into later. And this gives me so much more energy when you're in alignment to these things. So in that sense, I'm able to do more things. Again, not that things define who you are. I'm so much happier with myself. And when I say do things, I also like, I'm finally like, relationships was a thing that this not good enough thing would affect me. Not just work, in relationships, I never felt like I was good enough to be worthy of love. And now I got married last year, and like I'm such a happy place now with my husband. And we went through our own journeys of like couples therapy in the beginning because I didn't feel worthy of his. And another thing that I also want, I think this is another thing that I'm noticing now more, is that I still get challenges, I still have triggers, things still bother me, but I'm able to deal with it much better. And I'm able to go kind of like, I will have a bad day, but before I used to have bad weeks. I used to have bad months. And like even a bad year. So it's not that I'm like happy go lucky all the time. No, I still feel all the same emotions I felt before, much shorter time span. And even when I flow through it, it's shorter. So yeah, I'm just able to navigate things a lot easier. And yeah.
On those bad days, is there still a bit of a narrative around the root of not being enough or not being good enough?
Yeah. So it's still, this is what I always tell people, is like your inner critic never really goes away, but the way you respond to it does, and it changes. And now when it comes in, I'm just like, I used to just let it consume me and listen to it. And so I'll give you an example. So, like in yoga, I teach yoga regularly. And, I'm not the yoga teacher for everyone. I get it. Like when you're coming to a yoga class, for me, we're all about calming ourselves. We're like regulating the nervous system. We don't do crazy pretzel poses. We don't do handstands. And some people, when they go to a yoga class, they want to go hardcore. They want to do all of these things, which is fine. That's like a vinyasa and Ashtanga class. So sometimes they'll come to my class and it's like, your class is too easy. All we did was stretch. And like, I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. But
there are people that need to be in that class.
yeah. But like, I'll get like bad reviews, right? Because like it was too easy. And I was like, and before getting a bad review, like literally I'll get a bad review. And before that would have made me like, oh, I need to make my classes harder. I need to make them more challenging. People need to sweat. They need to burn. That's what my inner critic would have done and take over. Now I see these bad reviews and I'm like, oh, I'm not the yoga teacher for them. I'm not the person. And I accept that. So it comes in, and yeah, it does trigger me. I'm like, ooh, it's never fun to see this, these comments. But at the same time, it comes in and I'm just like, yeah, but why? Why did they give you a bad review? Like there's more of a dialogue between me and that inner critic. Before it was just like it telling you what to do, and I listened, and it didn't tell me nice things too. And on some days I'm really good and it comes in and I'm like, you're boring. I'm like, you're boring. And it just kind of shuts off, So yeah, I still get it. But again, I dialogue with it more. I don't listen to it. And yeah, I feel frustrated sometimes. I feel upset. I feel sad. I feel anger, but it doesn't take over my life in the way that it used to. It doesn't change my behavior in the way it used to change my behavior.
Yeah. And that's so insightful, because I think often there's this idea of like when somebody goes into coaching or personal development work or therapy, is that suddenly everything's going to go away and life is sunshine and rainbows. And we need to start normalizing that every emotion is very welcome, but it's our relationship to it. And also that there are some beliefs that we have, particularly I'm not enough, is a very universal belief. And I think often people think, well, if they still have thoughts like that now, then there's still something that's wrong with them, and that they still need to carry on, and that we always need to be doing the work, right? And that having that dialogue open and the awareness as to what's triggering it can be really helpful in overcoming that, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a paradox I've seen with high performers particularly, and you work with high performers and ambitious people. You are one, right? And I'm the same in that sentiment. But there's this paradox where the belief of I'm not good enough is there, but there is also a belief that they know that they are. It's like, I know I can do this. I've got the skill. I've got the talent. Like I've got evidence to say it, but yet there is still this underlying not enough not enough kind of mentality going on, which is why then often we see high performers just keep going and keep doing more and more and more, thinking that they're a high performer. In my eyes, if you can't sustain it, it's not high performance. But what's your thoughts on that paradox that exists?
Yeah, I think when it gets to that point, it can becomes like you're comparison. You're just constantly comparing yourself to this person. So like, and especially in the world that we live with now, it's like social media of like, you know, now, before you could just see like the people down the road from you, right? Or you could compare yourself to the people in your country or whatever. Now you're constantly comparing yourself to people all over the world. And we all know that on social media, everyone's just putting their highlight reels. So that's maybe even 5% of their life. So from that side, that's where I see, at least for my clients, is like this constant comparison to like other people, and like, oh, I am good enough. I've got the things, I've checked the boxes, I've accomplished my goals, but that person has this, and then this person does this. And again, that's kind of a bit of that like autopilot of just like going on and looking at external things to validate self-worth and who we are. So yeah, it's that comparison, that the comparison trap, I guess I could call it. Yeah. Like I fell for it a lot too, especially when early days of being a yoga teacher. Like I would compare myself to every single yoga teacher. And now I'm like, again, coming back to soul purpose, now I know who I am. And I'm like, I'm not her. I can't do handstands. I don't even want to do handstands. She's amazing at it. If anyone wants to do handstands, I will recommend her. That's not me. I'm the teacher you come to when you're like have a stressful day and you need to chill out. So then again, constantly looking externally, shifting that to internally, like what makes me special, what makes me unique, like how am I different from other people, not better, different. And that's again where that's the work that I do a lot with my clients. It's like, why are you comparing yourself? What does that person have and what do you have? See, we all have our own things.
Exactly that. And I think that comparison typically happens when there is a bit of a disconnect between soul purpose and what's authentic to us. And I think that plays such a role. And I think everything we've spoken about already, if this is the first time somebody's listening to all of these kind of ideas and how it all fits together around like some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing with burnout in your day-to-day, couple that then with now thinking, well, this could be coming from my past somehow, or my upbringing, and then coupling that with, well, if I go to a doctor, that's a bit overwhelming, that's a bit frustrating. And then it's like, okay, all of what we're talking about might be a bit overwhelming, right? And I think there's so many contributing factors to overwhelm that can then affect our ability to live in our purpose and to even know what our purpose is. So I'd love to know from your perspective, before we dive more into the purpose part, because I really want to go into that and authenticity with you, is how does somebody get to a point where perhaps they're not as overwhelmed, and they may well be interlinked with purpose and authenticity, to be fair?
Yeah. So I think this was a thing that was a game changer for me when I understood these things. If we break it down, so I'll just break it down where the overwhelm, there's so many different things out there. And there's like, I always like to say look at it from a body, mind, and soul level. So for the body part, so many of us are talking like, I don't know, looking at these wellness influencers with their green juices and their 5 a.m. workouts and their cold showers. And here's the thing you have to understand about all these things is that you need to figure out what works for you, right? And what's your medicine, because that might work for her or him, but it doesn't work for you. So for example, my husband is a 5 a.m. person. He gets up early, he works out with 6 a.m. He's showered. Me, I have to sleep in. Like I've tried that. I've tried waking up. I've tried that, but it actually made me more anxious during the day. So my workouts need to come at the end of the day so then I can sleep. So first off is like, it's not a one size fits all. Yep. Number two, you need to go on that. It's a very personal journey. Yep. And then the third thing I'm saying that is like the game changer I was talking about is the nervous system. Like, I don't know why no one talks about it. Took me like, I don't know, it was my yoga teacher training. And then again, in my soul purpose training and learning about how our nervous system works and how we have our own self-healing systems built into our body to regulate our stress and how simple it is. Yep. So if there's anywhere to start when it comes to stress, please just go down and learn about the nervous system. Your life will change. Yep. And there's hundreds of different ways to learn how to regulate your nervous system. And a bunch of them are free. So yep. Again, stop looking at those external things of like this juice, this cleanse, this detox, this retreat. Yep. Look inside. You have a self-healing tool called your nervous system that can help you regulate your body for your stress. So that's the first thing I would say. body, nervous system.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't like say that anymore. I would echo that massively. But there's, if anyone listening, there's many podcasts in our episodes around the nervous system and strategies to how to do that. So please go check them out, because it's so important that we start there. And often what we see is people don't start there, and then they'll go and throw themselves into an ice bath
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
dysregulated nervous system, which then makes it 10 times worse. So actually, by just kind of rushing in, sometimes that can actually be more detrimental, because now there might be another issue that shows up, because now you're even more dysregulated than what you were before.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that, because I just last year started getting to ice baths. I couldn't do ice baths for a really long time because my nervous system was so dysregulated. And another thing is that people will be like jumping into yoga, but there's like Ashtanga yoga, there's Vinyasa yoga, those hot yoga. These are not calming your nervous system. You know, so again, you need to take that time. I just started doing ice baths last year and I love them, by the way. But this is after years of learning how to regulate my nervous system. So again, exactly what you said. It's not just jump right in and do all these healthy things.
Yeah, and it's necessary as well, particularly around ice baths, but other things as well. Is like sometimes as well, a lot of people will hop on to certain trends that are happening, including instructors, which is a bit of a concern and a pet peeve of mine. Like you see them popping up, particularly obviously in the UAE as well. It's like this thing looks good, and I've been to some sessions that here, and also when we was living in Thailand, and nobody's teaching somebody how to breathe. Nobody's actually explaining this is why you should and you shouldn't do X, Y, Z, and this is where I'm such a strong believer. We have to take personal responsibility. We have to see, is this for me? We do have to learn a little bit about it. You don't have to become an expert, but you need to know enough to understand what are some of the contraindications, what are the things that could benefit you. And if your instructor can't answer those questions, go out the door, find another one, because there are lots that are fantastic. So
yeah,
please bear that in mind. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there because
no, and I agree with that 1,000,000%, because also like if you go to one bad yoga class or one bad ice bath, then you think all the yoga classes or all the ice baths are bad. And that's also something I felt for a long time. Is like I went to some bad yoga classes, and then I went to some really good yoga classes. I was like, oh, not every yoga class is like this. Not every ice bath, not every breathwork session is like this. So that's what I always say. It's a very personal journey. And the education part, which you just mentioned, is so important. And that's why when I'm doing workshops, especially corporate wellness workshops, they're all like, oh, come and do yoga. And I'm like, why? Like, I want you to understand why I'm doing breath work, why I'm asking you to meditate. So there's always that education piece, which is talking about the nervous system, which is really not that complicated. And then people understand why taking a deep breath is important. If I just like, I'm that person before, like if you told me, oh, like if the doctor told me you're stressed, take a walk, take a deep breath, I'd be like, that's stupid. And I would just like that. But now that I understand, me taking a deep breath, going on a walk is regulating my parasympathetic nervous system and calming me down. Now I'm like, breathing, I don't know if you could call it's an activity for me. I think it's a daily activity.
It is, right? And this is the other thing, like if that's the only thing you do, that's okay too. You don't have to stack on these like insane routines. Like I do love to like couple things, like and I am somebody that still loves to like do certain things in a certain order. Like I like to breathe a bit, then journal, and then breathe some more, and then move, or move first, depending on what's happening on like how I feel. Like so I love coupling things, but that's after years of experimenting and playing and understanding. Like start with one thing. Like you said, breathing is enough. In fact, it's so powerful. If that's all you ever do, fantastic.
Yeah. Agree. Absolutely.
There's so much pressure that can make things overwhelming as well. So I love that point that you've mentioned. Just bring it back to you. Bring it back to what do you feel is right for you? Experiment, find out, regulate that nervous system, and then it becomes obvious what's not, because then you start to notice when your nervous system is dysregulated.
Yeah.
Right? And you can recognize what isn't for you when you're in that state. And I think that leads really wonderfully, I think, into our sense of purpose, because I think when we actually start to come home to ourselves in many ways, and that's what happens when we regulate our nervous system, is we suddenly have a capacity to welcome into our life the things that we've perhaps always wanted, but also what is meant for us. And I think purpose is a big part of that. And sometimes finding your purpose, there's like so much pressure on it as well. Like pressure seems to be my buzzword for this episode. But there is a lot of pressure. People come to us because they are stressed, because they don't know what they want to do with their lives. And then that has all these other knock-on effects. They've been struggling with stress so much that now they even forgot what it was that stressed them out in the first place. So what role does unhealthy stress, I say unhealthy stress because there's good stress too, right? But what role does
Agree. Yeah.
what role does that play in our search for purpose, let's say?
Yeah. Yeah. So again, going from the body, mind, and soul, the soul is the last bit that I take my clients to. So the first part is body and regulating your nervous system, area stress. Like when you are in a constant state of fight or flight, go, 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 you are stuck in survival mode. That's all you know. You just know I need to eat, sleep, I need to do the next thing. There is no thought for like, ooh, what do I want? Why am I here? You can't. You can't. And so that's why I will never even ask, we will never start talking about that until your nervous system is regulated, until you can literally breathe and have space in your head to actually. So yeah, when you're that constant fight or flight, go, 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 there is no space in your head or your body to even ask those questions. So that's, yeah, starting with regulating the nervous system. And then we go into the mind, and then we go into the soul. So it is not just like overnight process. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's why we're just, yeah.
I love that you've got that order of things. Like, it's so, so important. So, okay, so let's say we've regulated our nervous system now. We're very aware, though, that purpose is still this thing that is like an itching in the background. And we know that perhaps the life we're living isn't the one that's meant for us, or the one that we want to continue living. What is the almost the next step in that process? What does that look like?
Yeah. So then we get into our mindset work. This is where we get into what I call our inner critics, or shadow work. And shadow work is all about your subconscious. This is where you have your limiting beliefs, your stories, your fears. And this is what I truly believe, is that we are born into this world knowing our purpose. We know it. We know it from a child. And even every single time I go on this journey with my clients, they're like, it's never like, oh, it wasn't like this big, like, oh my God, I had no idea that was my purpose. It was always like, I knew it deep down inside. That's the thing. So, but what happens? So we're born into this world knowing our purpose, knowing who we are. Then we go through life and we're told things about how we should act. We're told this, we're told that, we're told that. So here's our purpose. You pile on limiting beliefs told by other people. You pile on some more stories. You pile on this, different programming, different conditioning. So your purpose is buried underneath all of your limiting beliefs, all of these false stories that I like to call them. So when we start doing mindset work, I'm helping you remove those kind of limiting beliefs, remove that story of this, remove the doubt. And once you've removed the doubt, you start to see kind of like that light at the end of the tunnel. That's what it is. And again, it's never like this, what? It's I knew it all along. I just had all of that clutter, all of that fear fogging my purpose, my view of my purpose. So that's how then they two connect. So it's never, and I know I say sometimes I catch myself saying finding your purpose, but it's not an external search like, oh, I'm going to go off to Bali or on the 6-month journey and find my purpose. It's not out there. It's in here. And when you start to remove those things through the mindset work, it just starts coming up. Like it starts to come, and it's not even, you don't have to think about it. So it's not as overwhelming. I know sometimes and I agree, it does sound overwhelming. And that's why I try to be a bit more conscious of the language I use, like finding your purpose. No, like, uncovering it or discovering it. It's in you already.
And that's so, so necessary. And because our language plays a huge part in how we experience life, doesn't it? And even when I asked the question, I said for people searching for their purpose, because it's that idea, but that's the language that people use. It's the language I used to use when it comes
to totally.
But I think that where I was going wrong, for sure, there was beliefs in there was unresolved emotion in there was values mismatched in there was many things. But when I really started to unlock things, I think I was already on the back foot in trying to find my purpose, because I had already defined purpose as being this like external destination that was outside of me. And yes, I definitely agree with what you said there, is that actually it's inside of me, I've always known. But I also would probably go one step further and be like, then purpose isn't even something that we do. It's not something we aim for. It's a sense of being, in my eyes and in my experience. And yes, then that sense of being allows you to achieve certain things, but it's the being that's most important now. And it's nobody can take a sense of being away from you, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. It's who you are, and who you are translate into different areas of your life. And even though the things I do in my business are aligned to my purpose, I always say I am not my business. Like, I don't ever want to attach my worth to my business, which I did a lot. My business is part of me. I'm this bigger thing. Your purpose is your bigger thing. So yeah, your career, your work can be it, but it is not. And I think that's the other story we're told, is that your sense of purpose comes from your career or from your family only. And again, these are part of it, but they're not the only thing.
Yep.
So again, I still like, again, it's more of who you are and your unique skills and your unique gifts and how you contribute and you show up into the world in different aspects, either in your work, in your career, in your personal life, that it's like a more like a theme. That's kind of like how I would say, like a life theme.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
how I would say.
I love that so much, because it's our sense of identity, and when we give that away to something, that's when life can become challenging. Jonathan, obviously our listeners know as well, is obviously the co-founder of the Wellness Theory, my husband and partner in pretty much everything, and we often have conversations about what's life like if Wellness Theory didn't exist, and it's just like, oh, interesting question. And when we first asked that question, it was like, oh, I don't know if I like that. And then I had to really sit with that. I was like, why is that? Why don't I like that feeling? Like, what's going on there? And it was like there was a deep attachment to it. I'm deeply attached to it now, but from a different way. Like, if it was gone tomorrow, I could be okay with that, because I could trust that if that was the case, it's this part of the journey and there's clearly something else going on. But it was just this realization that, like you said, like, I'm not my business. Like, there's so much more to me than this. And that's where I think it comes back to then, well, if it's not this, then what is it? And that's where that who are you comes into place, right? And that's place of authenticity. And I think being authentic is something that for me I think is really, really rare still to this day. And I think there's lots of reasons for it, and I kind of understand that, and I know I've lived very inauthentically in the past, and I'm sure I still do in moments now, and like catch myself and I'm like, oh, is that really me? Is that really who I am? Do I behave that way, like, or whatever? And I have to question it. But I think if we're not even trying to tap into that and asking the question, I think it's then very difficult to line that up with our sense of purpose. What's your
Yeah,
thought?
I fully agree. I know everyone's like, be authentic, be real, be you, but it's hard. It's hard. When I first started getting into therapy and like figuring out that the reason I was having all these fights with my husband and also all these health issues is because I didn't think I was good enough and I wasn't loving myself. I was like, you are so dumb, therapist. Well, I love myself. I buy myself nice things, da 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 da. And then I figured out that and then it was hard to practice self-love because I didn't know who I was and I didn't know how to love myself. So if I don't know how to love myself, first off, who I am and how to love myself, how do I then tell someone, oh, I like to be loved like this?
Yeah.
So I had to go before I started loving myself, I had to go and figure out who am I? Because for most of my life was, again, perfectionist, people pleaser, perfectionist, my external achievements are who I am, people pleaser, whatever you want me to be, I be that person. I put on this mask in this group. I put on this mask in this group. So what I ended up doing was wearing all these different masks, trying to please different people, finding all of my external worth through achievements, and never actually ask, what do I want?
Yeah.
And even when I'm working with clients in the first session, I will ask this question. And sometimes, and I ask them, what do you want? Like, they can't answer me.
Yep.
And I get it, because I couldn't answer that for myself because I was so busy on autopilot mode, people pleasing, perfect. So even this, like, be authentic, be you, be real, like, it's hard. So can we also, like, acknowledge that, and like, it takes time to figure out who we are. It's not just like, because of if you're just on autopilot. So I totally agree. Authenticity is important, and authenticity does connect to your purpose. But if you've been in autopilot for so long, you can't just flip a switch and then be you or be authentic. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And you can look for the clues, right? Because I see that all the time as well. When you ask somebody, what do you want? They will list all of the things they don't want, if they then actually lead themselves to what they do want. So there can be clues within what you don't want as well. Yeah. But in all of what you just said there, like, it takes time is really important, and we don't typically take time. Life is fast, life is busy, we are on to the next thing. There's always something there available for us to take our attention, and that's going to become more and more as technology begins to evolve and our relationship to it doesn't. And there was something that I saw you post, I'm sure it was you, the way you started this new year around, I just remembered it as you were saying how in the past it would have been like setting goals, rushing into the year, straight on to the next thing, and actually you just went away. You went away and started the year in like at the end of January or something. I don't know if that was exactly it, but I really resonated with it because that's exactly the way I used to start and end the years. I still love to goal set and stuff, but there's that urgency that right, the year started, I gotta go, like, and that because it's fast. That's when the race goes, and that's when it all starts again. It was like, whoa, I wasn't taking any time to be able to line things up to know what I wanted. So I absolutely love that you shared that. That was when I was like, yeah, okay, guy, yep.
Let's chat.
Mental note. Awesome. Yeah.
So I definitely, and that's one thing I hear a lot. I don't have time. I don't have time. And these days, and yes, that was me in January. I didn't even, whatever. I was in Kenya. We were in a safari. Like, it was like, whatever. I got back to Biden. I was like, hustle bustle.
Yeah.
Okay. But the funny thing is, yeah, and I hear that excuse, I don't have time, I don't have time. And these days I take way more time for myself. I slow down way more, but I achieve so much. So I think there's this like myth that like if you slow down, that you're not going to be productive. And again, not saying that productivity is like the ultimate goal, but like you because I'm so aligned to who I am, now I am, when I'm going in the right direction, and I move faster than before. I just like kind of moving just to move. And like, I wasn't going, if my target was here, now I go like, you know, straight. Before I'd be like, la, 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 wasting all this time trying to, because I had no direction. I had no way to get there. But now I know exactly where I'm going. Things are clear. This is who I am. This is what I want to achieve myself. So everything is aligned. I'm not wasting my time with this distraction, that distraction, this comparison trap here. Yeah. And I just say that's it again, your purpose is kind of like your mission. You're kind of like your compass. Like you see, these are my things. These are what I used to have, I call it, and sometimes I see my clients, especially with businesses, I call it shiny object syndrome.
Yep.
What's that? That's the thing that distracts us.
Yep. And we, I'm like, so prevalent, isn't it? It's so prevalent, and it's so easy now because, you know, marketers have twigged onto that about human behavior as well, which makes it even worse. And because then the majority of people are on autopilot, it's like almost like seeing people getting sucked into that system, and it's so easy to do. I've been a part of that as well, and it's so tough. Like pace, I think, is so important and probably doesn't get the spotlight it needs enough, because what you was describing there, I visualize it as like an elastic band, a rubber band. When we're pulling back, we are slowing down, but as soon as we let go and we know we've had that time and we know why, we know the direction, we know where now to point that rubber band so that we can then just let go and then just this massive springboard off and you're away at the races. It's such a powerful way to live.
1 minute, I got this tattoo. It's an arrow, because exactly what you said, in order to shoot an arrow, you have to pull back on the arrow and then you let it go and then it goes forwards. And that's exactly the tattoo for that exact thing. Yeah, 100%.
I love that. I love that you even got it tattooed. I think it's absolutely brilliant, right? Because sometimes we need a reminder, right? Sometimes I do that. I definitely do. I know when I get, you know, it's like we spoke about earlier, it's knowing your body. Right. I know when I've perhaps fallen into old patterns and I haven't pulled back enough. And then I'm like, oh, okay, something here. Let's just come back to myself, take a day, whatever it needs to be. Like I've found my rhythm for this stage of life now. For example, practically for any listeners, like it's don't take meetings before 12 o'clock in the morning. Right. Sometimes I'll start work earlier, but I won't do any meetings unless it's something that I'm really drawn to or really passionate for, or something that's absolutely necessary. But just having that as a standard, like it makes a world of difference. It's like podcasting on Thursdays and Friday afternoons only. And if the guest can't do it, then okay, well, maybe somewhere down the line it will match up. And
there's the next week. Yeah, exactly.
It's having those boundaries, I think, can help with pace as well. But boundaries can be a tricky one as well. What's your thoughts on this? Because I think you are a great example of somebody that can achieve so much and do a lot that it's outside of the social norms as well. And I just want to explain why on that, actually, because I don't feel the beginning is success looks different for different people, right? And I think often we see on social media when it comes to business and coaching and stuff like this, is like you got to be all in, you got to be doing it all, and this kind of stuff. And for you, like you also have a full-time job that you love. Yeah. And you do yoga teaching, coaching, all of the work. Yeah. You do this around that as well. Like you're not like being restricted to these social norms. You're doing it your way because that makes sense for you and that's what you love to do. And I think I love that and respect that. I think it's brilliant. It shows the level of respect you have for yourself, that you don't fall into that trap of, well, I have to do it this way or that way. But you must have to have some real solid boundaries with like your time and your energy and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that's the thing is boundaries are not hard. It's the being vocal about it, right? Because then that was that people pleaser of me of like I can never say no to someone, right? Because I have to be there for them all of the time. So like that's where the difficulty with boundary comes of like being able to say no. Like exactly what you said. Like Mondays no calls with no ones and Wednesdays no calls. I just like you have specific days. And if they can't make it, and I always tell my clients 2 weeks in advance, otherwise it'll be booked out. And if they can't make it, you have the next week. And something that I do very intentionally, because yeah, I do have quite a few things going on in my life, but at the same time, like I'm like have to like trick myself. I have to like book me time in my calendar. So when I see something booked, and that me time is me going to the beach alone, listening to my podcast. It's not me doing anything. And also during the week, I book these two, I call them again, me times. And I go to a cafe. I don't bring my phone. I don't go to a cafe to work. I go to have a cup of tea, not coffee, because I don't need more caffeine. I got enough energy. So I purposely book in like me time to show that I'm busy. So that my calendar is full. Cause again, my thing is rest is still, I'll be honest, rest is still like like, that's where I, like I say, recovering perfectionist is like, I can find myself being like, I need to rest. That's my struggle, if you will. Other people, it's like getting things going. So that's why I was saying, even for my husband, is like him getting up early in the morning, that's good for him. Me sleeping an extra hour, that's better for me. That's more aligned to me. And not making, I used to like sleep in, especially on weekends, I like to sleep in a little more. And then I used to feel guilty about it. And then be like, oh, you should be doing something. No, me sleeping in, me taking time off is how I keep myself balanced, how I keep myself booked. But so yeah, I have to book in time for myself. Otherwise I see in my head, it sees an empty space in the calendar. It's like, let me book something. So I book my time. I even book kitten time. I have 3 cats, and every time I come home, at least 30 minutes. No, like, nobody speak to me unless you are a cat. Like, I don't care. I don't want humans. Like, so yeah, it's booking up my calendar with stuff for me. And it's, again, with that removal of that people pleasing, saying no, saying what about next week, and it works out. If it's not this week, it's next week, and it's fine. Nobody dies. Nobody. It's not an emergency. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's funny you say that, because that was actually a question that I always ask, and I still do sometimes, is if I do shift this or I move that, or if this happens, like what is actually the worst case scenario? And I just laugh, because I'm just like, and that really doesn't matter. But I have to sometimes have that dialogue to make me take that time to recover. I think we've got that in common, actually, like recovery and rest. I'm very grateful, because my other half is very good at making sure that I have rest as well, to some extent. And that's a really good support system there. But that recovery is doing something, and it took me a long time to get that. And I noticed it in what you said there, is like you block out going to the beach. I'm not doing anything, but I'm at the beach. It's like, well, that is doing something to some extent, right? Like that's actually more valuable than that. And I'm exactly the same, like, and it really is like that shift made a difference for me, because so you say, oh, I'm not doing anything, and I'm like, no, I'm doing the most important thing. And I was like, wow, okay, that's an interesting paradigm to live in. And then I rested and I had to put it back in.
And I think now that I think about that, the thing that would stop me the most wasn't the actual time in the calendar. It was the guilt. The guilt of like, oh, I'm just at the beach. I'm doing nothing. I'm wasting time. Oh, I slept in 2 hours. I could have been doing this. That sense of guilt is the biggest thing that would like really eat at me when it came to putting myself on the calendar, or like saying no to friends or saying no to clients to put me first. But now I understand this a lot better. But like, if you're in a person, like if you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're a healer, if you're a therapist, or what, you're helping people in some way, a mother, a parent, you need more time. You need more time to keep your cup full so that you can fill into other people's cups, because your cup is full. Like if I did not take me time and I showed up to calls for my clients, like I am there for them. And I'm such a better coach now because I take better care of myself. I'm such a better wife. I'm such a better everything because I take care of myself. And my husband, I it's funny, like you said, he is also my like kind of like cracking the whip. You need to rest. You need to rest. Like and so I agree with that. And he also, this is another thing I hear sometimes with people saying like, oh, but I can't, my kids, my husband, my partner, da, 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 da. Sometimes they don't have the support system. And in the beginning, he wasn't like this. In the beginning, he was like, what is this self-love? What is this self-care? I would like I would have like a little morning ritual where I just like take a bath and do all these things. And he's like, why? Let's go to breakfast. Let's go do something, you know, very much in that stuff.
Yeah.
But when he saw me taking care of myself and he saw my health start to shift, both physically and mentally, he started to get curious and he's like, so what do you do in the mornings? Yeah. And now he has self-care Saturday afternoons for like 3 hours. He goes to the steam room, he gets a shave. Yeah. And like, so I'm like, when you start taking care of yourself, the people around you will see your shifts and then they'll start to take care of you. You can't fix other people, but you can be an example. So with the boundaries as well, that can be hard. People are like, oh, I can't say no to people. I'm like, yes, you can. Yeah. And then they see you and then they're like, oh, I can say no too. Yes, you can too.
Exactly. It sparks this sense of curiosity, isn't it? And even if it's not right away, it's like the result becomes very attractive. Like my other half laughs at me because I love to journal so much. If it's suddenly quiet in the house, it's like she's probably journaling. And in the beginning he didn't really get it, and I'm like, we looked at the stack of journals, and I'm like, listen, all of this I could have said out loud to you. Would you have preferred that?
I like
when
that.
he's exhausted, and he was like,
yeah.
Carry on journaling, you know.
Here's a new notebook.
Exactly right. Literally yesterday, come home to a new journal. Bless him. No, it's but it's funny though because I think you're absolutely right. Is that our behaviors, not only do they obviously influence us for the better, it does start to influence other people without realizing it. And I think that's something that's hugely powerful. But I think that thing you mentioned about guilt. How does somebody overcome or start to address that guilt that they might be experiencing? Because they might be listening to this thinking, well, that's all well and good for you two because you've kind of gone through that bit. Like what happened with you that shifted it to be guilt-free?
Oh, so much work. Not another overnight thing. And this is something that I do now. It's called shadow work or kind of getting into your subconscious. So there's many different ways to kind of go and do these types of things or learn how to do it. For me, the type of work that I love the most is also something called somatic work. I'm not sure if that has come up here. So what happens in this idea, somatic work is basically the understanding that our emotions carry energy. Yep. And these emotions get stuck into our body. And over time, if these emotions stay stuck in our body, they can become physical, like health issues or even like diseases. And I think also a lot of functional medicine also looks at that too, as well as the connection. And I think the body and mind connection, we're starting to see more and more of that. So with somatic work, this is the way that I did it, that helped me the most. Again, there's so many different ways. So it's not, if you're not feeling this, you don't need to take it. But what I understood is like, I was carrying guilt, right, in my body. So through somatic work, I was able to identify the parts in my body where I was carrying it. Yep. And here's the thing with emotions, they just want to be felt and they just want to be acknowledged. Yep. And it's, again, not an overnight thing. And again, because I'm working with my subconscious, I had my somatic coach hold space for me because you cannot go into your subconscious on your own. But what happens in this subconscious or the shadow work that she did for me, which I also do for clients, is you bring that stuff. My guilt was stored in my subconscious because for a long time in my life, I never let myself feel guilt. I would stuff it in a box, put it in the dark corner, had all these coping mechanisms to distract myself or numb myself from these heavy feelings. Yeah. But they never really go away. So they started coming back in. And so I know I say just, but it's not just, I started to allow myself to feel it in those somatic sessions. I started to move it from my subconscious into my conscious. And once something is in your consciousness, you can start to journal. You can start to reflect. You can start to dialogue with it. You can start to understand it better. Yep. So now when the guilt comes in, again, there's journaling that I do for myself. But to get to this point, I needed help. And I still work with my somatic coach like every other month. I call it little maintenance sessions. Just like with your cars, you have to take your cars for maintenance sessions, even if there's nothing wrong. Yep. So again, doing that through somatic work, helping me understand and process the guilt, bringing it into my consciousness so that now I can journal on it, has helped me understand like all of the root causes of where it came from. And again, it was a lot of growing up, seeing my mom. She was like a superwoman. She took care of us. She had no help. She worked. She did all these things. and she never took time for herself, but she also suffered from like depression for a really, really long time. So it got to her. But because I saw her doing everything, then I thought I had to do everything. I thought I had to be superwoman. And I'm not even a mom. And I'm over here saying yes, yes, yes to everyone because I'm superwoman, because that's what I kind of saw for me. Yeah. So yeah, that's, again, not an overnight thing. It took a lot of time.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to mention that, and I love the fact that somatics works for you. I think it's interesting because behind most modalities, it always comes back to the same thing: is identify the emotion, feel it without judgment, compassionately, and that's when we can learn from it and we can let it go. And I think so leaning into whatever suits you, to our listeners, is really, really important. But it all comes down to that same thing. It's paying attention, knowing it's okay to feel it in the first place. And you'll find what the thing is that might need to shift, or what the belief is, or what history might have led to this moment as well. But having the guts to actually explore it and leaning in is exceptionally courageous. And I think it's fantastic, like the work that you do and the work that we do is bringing that into the light. And I think it's so powerful. And the reason we do what we do is because of our clients. Like, you see that if they're willing to show up and lean into that courage, well, then I'm going to do this for as long as they're going to show up. It's like, it's just this no-brainer, because I guess you've been there, I've been there, we've kind of felt what that means and how hard it can be to get to that point as well. Like, it makes it so much more meaningful. And I think what you've just shared there, it does all really kind of loop back into how we started the conversation around, understanding ourselves, understanding how is stress showing up, and the overwhelm, so that we can actually start to hold space for understanding what our purpose could be, and feeling into that purpose and seeing what's authentic. Kai, I do want to ask you before we wrap up, is there anything else that we haven't mentioned today that you think our listeners need to hear that we haven't spoken about in this context?
Yeah, so this is something I always say in my workshops, and something that took me forever to realize, is that when I was going on this healing journey, I was like, what is the medicine? What is the medicine that I have to take? What is the pill? Da, 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 da. And then going through this whole thing, and even the thing with my clients, now I understand you are the medicine. You are the medicine, or we are the medicine. You are your own medicine. Yeah. So if there's anything you take away, I want you to remember that you are your own medicine. And yes, I love getting help and I love going to all these things, but the real medicine is you. Yep. So when you start connecting more to your nervous system, which is within you, getting to who you are and your soul purpose, I can just tell you everything starts to shift, but it's all within you. So that's just, if I could leave on that note, that's the thing I would want people to know.
Amazing. I love that so much. Kai, where can our listeners come and find you and follow your work?
I am everywhere. I am on LinkedIn. I am on Instagram. I'm on a website. Just put in Kai Simmonds and you will find me pop up somewhere on the internet. Or if you're in Dubai, you can catch me at Shimmy's. I teach yoga a couple times a week.
Amazing. Well, all of the links will be in the show notes as always, so it'll be nice and easy for our listeners to come and find you. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, for how you're showing up in the world, and for leading by a really authentic example. I absolutely love that about you. And just thank you so much for your time and coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed this so much.
If you enjoyed this episode and you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
Then share it with a friend who you think might benefit.
Spread the word. That's how we're going to impact the world, by helping each other.
We appreciate you so much, and as always, unconditional love and wellness to you.